update us on the reform conducted in Ukraine. Шановні колеги, на тижневій основі в нас пан Дмитро Шимків, заступник голови президентської адміністрації, відповідальний за напрям реформ. І пан Дмитро зараз нас поінформує, що зроблено за останній тиждень. Прошу, пане Дмитро.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I congratulate you with the signing and ratification of the agreement on association, because that is the main event of today, and because the association agreement is the base, is the foundation, which defines the direction of reforms that must take place in our country. And this vector of European community must be, especially now when we speak about elections to the parliament, must be the main vector of our political forces of Ukraine, because that is the direction of the moment, which we choose. We chose that during Maidan. I would like us during the political discussions. During political discussions, they do discuss reforms and how, not what, because we decided about what, and that is the moment to Europe. Today, I wanted to show you a diagram and to speak. To show how the situation with reforms in the country looks like. This is a joint work of our team and a team of Ukrainian Media Center. And this is the way really it looks, and creation of reforms or development of reforms. We have, as you see, the President, Cabinet of Ministers, Parliament of Ukraine, National Council of Reforms, strategic advisory groups, and also focus groups of reforms, and also experts, donors, and civil society. Those are the main owners of the process. If you see that it's in different colors, there's the issue of coordination, financial, legislative initiatives, and expert assistance. And today, that view, when we see this, we see that we have different levels of taking decisions, so introduction of reforms, operational governance of management of reforms in the Cabinet of Ministers, and also there is long-term or systemic development of introduction of reforms in the National Council of Reforms Executive Committee, which sets up focus groups of reforms, and Deputy ministers participate in that work, and also it is planned to have an office of projects. And there will be professionals who will be able to coordinate the work of these advisory focus groups. Those focus groups, the main task is to develop concrete reforms, concrete actions, and also modeling of different complicated reforms. If we speak about the reform of energy sector or healthcare, then reform of public service also. As an example, we have a strategic advisory group, and in the future they will fit these focus groups of reforms, and their knowledge will be brought to the approval and then Council of Reforms. And if we look at this as to reforms, and we take into consideration political campaign and political election campaign and a difficult economic situation in the country, we have to remember that only cooperation and efforts to be together, and that is what we need for reforms to go on. Reforms begin with will, and I believe that political will in all political parties, in all political players will stay as to reform in the country. I'm not running into politics. I stay to be a public servant and who is responsible for coordination of reforms and for the National Council of Reforms to work and to develop reforms. So Now I wanted to discuss those issues which we working on last week, and we spoke a lot about the Anti-Corruption Bureau. I believe that we will see something today in the Parliament. I hope that now I know that there is a vote and there are discussions in the Parliament, and there will be a a committee in the Parliament on Anti-Corruption Bureau. There is a progress as to 3G. We are waiting. We're looking for the resolution of the government. So there is a progress in this direction. I wouldn't like to take the baton of leadership from the cabinet of ministers, and that regulation will will allow to start 3G. And also, last week I had a chance to work with many group of experts on how to reform the public service, and there is an initiative in the public service, and it's turning into legislative initiatives. Plus, at the moment, there is. We developed the package of reforms, and we are planning to bring it from the president to the new parliament. And a lot happened. A very interesting conference of Yalta conference, and the president of Ukraine showed the vector of the direction of the country, and there were a lot of discussions around reforms, starting with the in economy, anti-corruption, decentralization. I participated in that event, and I had a lot of meetings. And what we are missing, dear journalists, is our communication outside about events in Ukraine. That's why I would like to ask you to speak more with international media on events in Ukraine, from the point of view of development, opportunities, because in our economy needs investments. I believe it's an obligation on everyone to do something to bring investments to Ukraine, because investments move economy. Next week we are planning to institutionalize some process around a National Council of Reforms, and to speed up the work on some initiatives related to public service, deregulation, etc. Reforms require a lot of work, because when we speak about Anti-Corruption Bureau, it took several years to develop that law. Some civic groups had to work on that for several months. So we need to be tolerant, and I will do everything possible to inform you on a regular basis on events that are taking place. Thank you. Thank you that you comply with your promises. Yesterday there was Mr. Daniluk, and who is a representative of the president in the cabinet of ministers. He told that implementation of the association agreement will begin right after it is ratified. At 1 o'clock, there was supposed to be simultaneous procedure of ratification of the agreement with the EU. So tomorrow, that will be one more burden for you, because you have to start implementing it tomorrow. Or is it for you just a symbol? How are you, a person who is responsible for reforms in the presidential administration? The agreement is a frame of reforms, and also I mentioned that during the US conference, it was about Ukraine during the next 5-6 years must do everything possible for us to meet criteria of membership in European Community, and the agreement will allow us to do that. It doesn't mean that we are competing for membership. No, that will allow us to be qualified. So we should qualify those criteria. If we achieve that, it will be a huge achievement for all the country, in economic sense, political sense, and social any. During conference last week, there were different opinions about reforms. On one hand, they told that war is not a good time for reforms, or not to stop reforms. And the president of Lithuania told, or Estonia, he told that running reforms during the war is not realistic. If Poroshenko succeeds to do that, that will be extraordinary. What is your approach? Will you pay attention to the war and run reforms, or will you wait for the reforms to be over? Reforms should be conducted, implemented under any conditions. If you look at the territory of Ukraine, the war is taking place in two regions. Not even in regions, but in several districts of those regions. If we look at that bigger territory of Ukraine, where there's economic development, when where there is a social activity, and where we can run reforms, or where too we can bring investments, because the reforms are not for the sake of reforms. Reforms mean changes. A change of paradigms or conditions, economic conditions, social conditions in the country. So we can change conditions of functioning of the state in those regions in the major part of Ukraine. That will allow to bring investments, because we need to develop our economy. And I believe that despite people's opinion that a war is an excuse, I don't believe so. For corruption fight, the war doesn't stop. And anti-corruption war, that is the biggest reform required. I spoke with two investors and the representatives of BRD, and the biggest issue that holds back investors is not the war, but corruption. Artem Musak, News. You speak about reforms that will be brought from the president to the parliament. Can you give us details about those reforms? And when we speak about the package of reforms, we consider the package of reforms as to deregulation initiatives. There was such a presentation. And if we speak about the list of deregulatory steps, that's about the cabinet of ministers and about the parliament. We take 200 the most resultative, and there is a team that is working on that. Also, we have a list of reforms in judiciary, and Alexei Filatov in the administration of the president is working on that reform of the law enforcement bodies, and Alexander Daniluk is working on that. When we speak about anti-corruption, we have a joint team. We speak about deregulation or decentralization, public service. We have some preparatory documents for that, and some experts from civil society work more than 15 years on that issue, and there are interesting initiatives, and there will be a round table this week around that issue. So these are the urgent reforms we have to introduce, and many people come to me with reforms or ideas, and we need to run about 60 reforms in the country. But to state, it's not realistic to say that we'll run all of them at the same. There are 11 key reforms we need to run. As to the rule of law, that includes court prosecution, etc. If we don't solve the regulation issues, we will not solve other issues in agriculture, in investments, in financial system, etc. All the requirements to reforms that are necessary to meet criteria of membership in European Community. Thank you. I see on this chart donors that should sponsor not only strategic advisory groups but also cabinet of ministers. What kind of sponsors are there? We have some agreements. We have, for example, by the cabinet of ministers, there is a center of reforms implementation, and there are people. They are supported by Renaissance Foundation. Those people develop concrete initiatives. Then they bring them to the cabinet of ministers, and as in Renaissance, USAID, Renaissance Foundation, and the list of donors. It's 10 pages of text, and it's like a donors map, and there are a lot of organizations, and they ask about cooperation, and there are issues for European social community. There is an issue for experts. I was trying to develop a chart of cooperation between different stakeholders and owners of this process of reforms in Ukraine. What's the budget of sponsorship or that assistance? I don't know about the budget. They pay the salary to those people whom they hire as experts for different initiatives. So I cannot even speak. I cannot speak about the budget of the cabinet minister. What about the strategic advisory groups? If you look, there's public information about people who are working there. You can speak to Renaissance Foundation, and I believe that they will give you this information, how we involve these people, and everything is transparent. They give reports about their work every month, and believe me, I have 6 people who help, whom we involved, and they work on different reforms, and they help us to cooperate. For example, with the advisory group on a reform of public service, because the biggest task the National Council of Reforms is facing, and Executive Committee is facing, is a coordination of different initiatives in the country. There are initiatives. We put it here, focus groups, and you can imagine that where civic society, there are some groups of donors, experts build their groups, and all of that together is all of them are working on different reforms. If we take any topic, any issue, for example, education, we will see that there are lots of different options, and between different participants of that process, there are conflicts, there are arguments. It's good because the truth is in arguments, and a compromise is there. But when there are personal fights that happen, we have to discuss that, because for some compete for grants, some. If you speak about me and my team in the National Council of Reforms, we have representatives of all institutions. I wanted to say that we are interested in the development, and we are interested in concrete results.
And so we're ready to involve all the experts, civil society, to set up the teams which focus on some issues. And around these teams, there should be several legislative proposals be gathered, regulatory or deregulatory, which will then become a real result. And the same groups are to ensure monitoring of implementation of reforms, because passing the law does not mean that we automatically start the reform. That's just the basis for the reform. Please don't forget to introduce yourself. Oksana Melnichuk, UCMC. In the last 5 years, the government has been talking about reforms. There were many schemes and proposals and strategies in the presidential administration. What I'm concerned with, as a person who's working on enhancing potential, not a single time I have seen such an important item as formation, training of people who have to be providers of reforms. We have 600,000 of civil servants, and they are Soviet people. The process of this Sovietization, are you planning that? Will there be some brief training programs like in Poland or France? And the next question, the reform has sense when it's identified in time. To talk about reform for 5 years would be wrong. Do you have any time frame? The example of Poland, the reform of economics was lasting for 1 month, decentralization for 6 months. I understand that these are not simple questions, but they are important to understand whether we move correctly. Let me criticize the reforms of economy in Poland did not last for a month. We studied the Polish experience. The economic reform cannot last for 1 month. It can be initiated or it could be developed, and then implementation lasts some time. When we are talking about the terms, time frame, any reform is the change. It's initiated and then it lasts, because then there is this transitional period from one system. The system is in one situation, then it goes to another. We're talking about the regulation when something is cancelled. There's a transitional period, and that takes some time. The initiative on the regulation means that we are canceling, that we are implementing deregulation initiatives. We are canceling Cabinet of Ministers resolutions which liberalize this or that activity in this or that sphere. After that is introduced, we need to explain and see results, because majority of the regulatory acts are done so that we can see the economic growth or engagement, involvement of investments to this or that sector. Because talking about some sector, that would mean, if we're talking about the construction sector, that means that the investments will go and there will be more constructions. Talking about energy sector, that would mean also the reduction of corruption component. So the time frame is important. We are trying to structure the initiatives, talking about the regulation initiatives, where there are more than 1,000 of them, and we are selecting about 200 of them that the expert group will be working on. Now back to education, or training of people who can do that. And there's a technical issue of implementing reform when we analyze how many regulatory bodies we have, what they do, how they are set up, and how they can be either cancelled or merged. There's the initiative of the Cabinet of Ministers, where we see that some of the bodies will be merged, and we would like to see the cutting down of their number. Also, but people, there's technical work. It's a big volume of work. Then, when we are talking about preparation of initiative, first of all, that is a big creative work. We need to analyze. One of the tasks we are working on today, the financial situation in the country is very complicated. How can we attract money for Ukraine? And there are certain standard and non-standard instruments, and we're looking for them. People are working who either have experience, so we communicate to experts. We invite the world-class experts who were implementing reforms. In Poland, for example, we talked to many who were doing that in Poland, Georgia, Baltic states, and we receive the feedback from them. And then when the concept, the content is, that's the content, and then it should turn into legal document. And for that we need lawyers who can put it into legal document. They need to understand how this document depends on other documents, and that's a big work. And civil servants do not always have experience, inspiration to do that. And back to donors. For that, we need donors who help invite experts who can do that. Education, training, yes, that's important. But for training, we need to understand who should we train, because besides creative legislative drafting work, there's a big group of works which are done by civil servants, and that is to ensure functioning of the state. I will not enumerate numbers of documents that come from civil society organizations, from associations, business structures, and these are also to be processed, the reports are to be prepared, and that also is a lot of work, and that also takes a lot of time. So the most important task that many of people are facing in the Cabinet of Ministers and presidential administration and the Verkhovna Rada is allocating time, finding time where we can work on creative changes, because the ideas that are in Poland, they will not always work in Ukraine. There are ideas in Georgia which are to be modified. For that, we need discussions, time, drafting, and that's a big creative work. It's just like engineering. We want to see training of those people who can do that, but that's quite a complicated process. And we see similar process in politics when we need to teach politicians to be modern European politicians. And when drafting and implementing reforms, we undergo this training. Thank you for all who help us, who teach us. Thank you that in your busy schedule you find time to come here to inform us about what has been done, about the next steps, or sometimes about what hasn't been done, but you always have explanations. And looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday. And we congratulate you with ratification